Maybe I'll.
Doors. So I just had to turn the owl on physically. Do you know how to do that? A little button. Yeah, it turned itself off completely. All right. You.
That's okay, Olivia said I.
So I think this is like I'll move. I'll move that to the bottom, at least. Yeah, so then the PDF, you had them open, great, they're both here. That's one highlighted already, we'll get out of that. They're both there. People see us, oh, they did. All right, is that? Okay. Oh, yeah, it's right there. Nope, yeah, they don't see at home, they don't see it. Cool. Absolutely. Just here.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you. I'm Carrie. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming today. Yeah, this is really great. Is it Lozada? Okay, that's in Lozada, or Bergen. Anything you all need? I don't think so. Bergen has this, I think, really squared away with, but, I am in the video. Yep, you are in the video right now, and it is recording. So, I will monitor the chat. I'm on my laptop, so I'll monitor the chat from there, so the camera's not just seeing me. To share the other two, you can go ahead and just queue up the two PDFs that Olivia shared. So you would just kind of go off and click on those. So you're sharing what's on the screen. And so at the end, you know, so that's what.
Should we like just put it on the room?
I think that. Taking space.
Does it kind of like catch like what's happening and like show us?
Yeah, it looks, it lights and moves. It does like, it does.
It's 10. I think maybe we should
Sure. So I'll let you if you want to start. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. On this chilly day, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but you know, here we are, spring of Minnesota. My name is Olivia Bergen. I am the Rochester area organizer with Isaiah. And I'm so excited to be here this morning. We have already, a lot of amazing things have been happening here at Christ United that we've been partnering together on this spring that maybe you all have been a part of. And I really want to thank Pastor Kirkland, and Carrie and Kathy and Julie and everyone who helped make this. So thank you for having us. We want to take a second to introduce ourselves. So I'm going to first let Kathryn Lozada give you an introduction to who she is and then tell you a little bit about me too.
Thanks, Olivia. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathryn Lozada. I'm our regional Southern Minnesota organizer with Isaiah. I've been in this role for about 5.5 years. Originally, when I was living in Northfield and getting to build that team that had started there, but I love connecting with people of faith and shared values across our region and hearing what our communities need to thrive and how we can act out the values of love God, love your neighbor in everything that we do. That's how I was raised, in a very social justice oriented Presbyterian church that I effectively, call a hippie church. Of wonderful people who were thinking about how do we live out environmental justice and do peace and justice and call on our government to be on a better neighbor in everything that we do as well, and shape our systems and swim upstream to address more of the community needs in addition to the band-aids that so many of our faith communities can be already good at. How do we address those needs for the root causes as well? And so I love being part of this organization that is working together with people of faith and shared values across race, religion, gender, geography in Minnesota. And I get to run around and support the work now on the ground with Olivia here in Rochester. Some of you may have known me a few years ago pre-pandemic. I did one of these forums here too. And then we had organizer Jack Dudley based here in Rochester for a couple of years as well. And now he's working with one of our allies in the Capitol, and we're very excited to have Olivia continuing to build this work here with you all in Rochester. So I'll hand it back to her, and then we'll dig into a little bit of who Isaiah is as an organization, what you all might have gotten connected with already, and what we can keep building together going forward.
So thanks again, everyone. My name is Olivia, and I'm the Rochester area organizer with Isaiah. I have another colleague here too, Salah Mohammed, who organizes with our Muslim coalition of Isaiah, which is a huge part of our base. He organizes across southern Minnesota. So as some of you may have gone, they had a community iftar last night for Ramadan, which was wonderful. So I myself, I came to Rochester about 1.5 years ago, and I started at Isaiah about 3 months ago. So I'm relatively new. But it is just, we've just hit the ground running. There's been a lot of exciting work. And why I'm really excited to be here organizing in this moment is that I really care about building community. And I'm really kind of troubled by seeing that in many places, we're seeing a real erosion of trust and patience and understanding between people. You know, this kind of loss of vulnerability and care that we have for each other as neighbors. And obviously we are moving forward in many amazing ways, but I really just want to see, I realize that the only way that really can solve our biggest and most urgent problems is if we do it together. And so that's why I'm really excited about the work that we can do with Isaiah. For me, I think about what kind of a city and a community can we build here in Rochester, and one that is a place that I would like to live for a long time, where our future generations are going to thrive. And for me, that means things like having walkable neighborhoods where we can easily get to where we need to go without having to get in a car and go a long way. Having a community with really excellent education and childcare for our next generation to make sure that they're prepared for the future. They have caring educators in the classroom, that the educators are really well paid because they're some of the most important people in our society. And in this community that values and has this amazing innovative medical landscape, making sure that healthcare is something that everyone can afford when they need it. So that's kind of some of the vision of what I'd like to see our community move closer to be. We're not quite there yet, but I know that it's really possible if we organize together and if we decide to lead and say, this is what we stand for. And I know that that's what a lot of you are about, and that's what brings you here, is you're curious about what can we do together. So I'm really excited to see you all today, and we're going to talk about a few things today, about a little bit of what Isaiah is, about how this legislative session is moving, which you may know is at a rapid fire pace, and what we're kind of doing locally in the community to shape and make sure that we get a lot of exciting things done by the end of the session next month. So Kathryn, tell us a little bit about.
Yeah. Well, we want to do a little level setting because some of you may be somewhat familiar with Isaiah, or some of you are brand new to us, and that's great too. So I wanted to see what you all know about Isaiah, and what have you heard about it at CUNC so far? I know I've seen some familiar faces. Anything you want to shout out, or what has sparked with you or resonated with you?
I think it's just the appreciation of our church stepping up and being part. That's really meant a lot
Yeah.
for us.
Thanks, Tony, for our church stepping into this. Awesome. Anyone else want to share?
I think it's exciting because this organization shared values as well, and crossing different faith communities and traditions, that we can all be working on this in a collective way. and not doing just our part at a hyper local level, which we will continue to do, but see the possibility of bigger things and working together and seeing how big our community of shared values is.
I love that. Thank you, Nick. So I'll repeat some of that. So collective action, building upon the good work that you're already doing on the local level, but working with more people across faith tradition, shared values, to make more possible.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm brand new,
You're brand new.
so I'm excited.
Awesome. We're very glad you're here today. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So Isaiah is a home of people of faith and shared values who are acting collectively and powerfully towards racial and economic and climate justice in Minnesota. It was formed around the year 2000, bringing together several different faith-based organizations, primarily in the cities and the St. Cloud area. That we're already working on social justice issues, more of the hyper-local issues, and realizing we share a set of values. And there's only so much we can do in our particular community. We have to work together at a bigger scale, and we can get a whole lot more done when we work together that way. So now we organize across the state and has really grown and expanded a lot in the last few years in particular, but formed with that intention and that verse of Isaiah 58:12, that you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in. That we're called to do that work right here on. So in the last few years, expanding from primarily 100-ish Christian spectrum of congregations, again, mainly in the cities in St. Cloud, has grown to include the Black Barbershop and Congregation Cooperative, the Muslim Coalition that has over 30 mosques. I'm sure there's more than that across the state. Our Kids Count on Us coalition that organizes over 500 now community-based childcare centers, including a number here in Rochester. And a newly formed young adult coalition that joined during the pandemic on primarily college campuses, and then organizing like other young adults that maybe aren't connected to institutions, that are trying to find their political home too, and build that shared future, recognizing we need a multi-generational movement to do it with you all, right? And then our most recent rural organizing project. So Todd Lippert was a longtime member, helped start our Northfield area chapter, and I got to know him through that work. Was the minister at First United Church of Christ there. He's had the long time call of building rural people power, and did that in the state legislature then for a couple of years. Became our first member leader in the state legislature. And was realizing he felt that call to do more of that outside in the world again too, because our rural communities are feeling a whole lot of left behind. And there's so much more that we have in common, and we can work together to address it. So we are building this vehicle to put our faith and shared values into action, build multiracial, multi-faith beloved community together, so that we're building beyond this room, but there's rooms like this, like the community iftar last night with the Muslim community. There's rooms near the Capitol where people can get to the Capitol more frequently, as we'll talk about in a second. But that looks different in different seasons, and the intention is to do nonpartisan politics, is collective decision making. So I want to separate out sometimes partisanship versus politics. Our politics is collective decision making and should be where we exercise our values together in public. Democracy is beloved community in public. It's how we exercise love in public too. And for me, we have an imperfect two-party system in our country. I don't think one party can represent fully someone's values. So how do we decide from my place of faith and shared values, here's what I want our democracy, our society to look like, and how that should reflect, and to hear what that means for Olivia, to hear what that means for Tony, for Nick, for many of you who I haven't met your names yet. Right? We can figure that out together. Our job is to find some ideal middle ground between the two major parties in our country. It's to be rooted in our faith and values, and to say, here's how that is calling us to act. And let's figure that out with more of our beloved neighbors. And we try to push on the whole system to move in that direction too. So another part of that is that democracy should be about more than just one party or one candidate. Sometimes it feels like the only way we participate in democracy is checking a box And the choices are between Coke and Pepsi on a day in November. For our democracy to truly reflect our values, to truly work for all of us, to truly reflect every beloved child of God is worthy of dignity and respect and being able to care for themselves and their loved ones. That calls us to step in and shape the whole system. And how do we talk about politicians and engage with politicians in a way that says, here's what our communities need to thrive. How do we work with you? And recognize they're also beautiful, messy, complex human beings too, with things that they care about. How do we build enough people power to be accountable to actually what our communities need? And politics is also personal. Sometimes it feels like it's one awful headline after another, mostly about national stuff, that sometimes makes me want to pull the cover over my head. And it feels overwhelming, and there's so much pain in this world. What in the world can I do about it? And it feels much more complex than we're told sometimes. Or how do we take a system like immigration or the economy or healthcare? How do we talk about those things with people in our lives? When we talk about how a system impacts us and people we love, politics is personal. There are decisions made about us, without us, every day. But how do we decide to step in and say, here's how this is impacting me, someone I love, my community, and what do we do about it together? We want to be part of that decision-making, not to have power over others, but to build people power with is the ability to get stuff done for the common good. And then I know there's a whole lot of tension around faith in politics, but faith in politics, we are a whole people. We want to bring our values into public. And again, a democracy and public is collective decision making. So faith communities like yours have an incredibly powerful role. Nonpartisan does not mean neutral. Right? I hear, oh, okay, I got some resonances on that one. Nonpartisan means committed to our faith and values. And we're trying to create a new people-centered politics in our state, one rooted in abundance, where everyone is in and no one is out. And many of your congregations are already doing incredible work down the hallway even, right? To address immediate needs in your communities. And the more that we work together, build on that work that you're already doing and build more collective capacity, we can address more of those needs at the root causes and address the systems that perpetuate injustice. And then we partner with a whole lot of other partner organizations, like the We Choose Us Coalition that y'all have had events with too for inclusive democracy, and plenty of others. I'm sure there's a good list, but then I will turn that back to you for how we are thinking about this, putting our faith and values into action this legislative season that we're in, because there's lots of different work and different possibilities and a lot on the table that is possible right now in this season. All right.
So thinking about the legislative session and everything that is happening. So it started in early January and it's ending around May 22nd. So we're kind of in the final stretch here of the legislative session. A lot has been moving, and I'm kind of curious, some of you have a handout about some of Isaiah's legislative priorities, or maybe you've been seeing in the news. I have a question for all of you. Like, what have you seen that's gotten done that you're excited about so far this year?
Driver's licenses for everybody.
Yes, thank you, Bruce. So driver's licenses for all. As of before about 20 years ago, people who were undocumented were able to get driver's licenses. But in 2003, that right was revoked. And so ever since, we as an organization, a lot of organizations in Minnesota are working to restore that so that people can get to work, can get to school, can get to church safely, and be able to move about our communities. So that's something that was passed into law this year. We're really excited about it. What else are people?
Oh, a question on that. If they, I watched the news, but I didn't hear if they will have a qualifier on there that they are documented or not.
I don't think that was.
I hope not, but
So, yeah.
I didn't know.
That was something,
Because-
yeah.
But they have to have insurance.
Oh, yeah.
You see, all of a sudden, yes, blacks have been through all sorts of things.
Well,
Because they said yes.
that's right. And part of the problem was that those folks couldn't get auto insurance
That's right.
before having this act. So there's a lot of things that our society is going to be safer, it's going to be more mobile, it's going to be more connected because of this new legislation. So that's a huge change.
Yes.
What else do we know has gotten done? So,
Electricity.
yeah, so 100% clean energy by 2040, requiring state utilities to move their energy production to renewable energy sources. But this is a big change, this is bold action, and it's exactly what we need to actually confront the climate crisis. I have to say, as a young person, kind of sometimes quite cynical and sad and feeling like, can we ever actually make progress on this monumental challenge? That was really inspiring to me this year, that here in Minnesota, we're deciding we're gonna do something about this and make the change that we need to get in that direction.
Like top 5 in the country, climate justice legislation. You all helped make that possible. Yeah, it's good.
Celebrating that.
Yes. Woo.
Our other big priority that's already been done is voting rights restoration, restore the vote. This is for folks who were on felony probation or parole. They are no longer incarcerated, but live in community with us, and they have a right to also have a say in community decision-making and to be represented. Heard testimony from folks who do not have voting rights, and are on probation and parole, and literally testimony from them that they try to speak to their elected officials, and their elected officials just kind of ignore them and turn away because they know that this isn't really my constituent because they can't vote for me, which is just heartbreaking and is not the way that we should do. If we're living in community together, we all have a say together. And sometimes Minnesota has very long, some of the longest in the country, probation and parole periods. So sometimes that means that people are without voting rights for 20 years. And so this is going to be huge. 55,000 Minnesotans are going to be impacted by this having their voting rights restored. So those are some of the things that have already gotten done. There's a lot of fast movement. And some of these things have taken, yes.
I was going to comment, as an individual, I often, when I contact the legislator, I feel unheard anyway.
Yes.
And I feel like organizations like Isaiah and many others, Bush Bulletin, are the ones that seem like they get people's attention. And as an individual, I'm just, wasting my breath.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'll just repeat so everyone can hear, but expressing a feeling of being unheard by our legislators, that probably a lot of us have the experience of writing to our legislators or trying to talk to them, giving them a call. It's happened to me many times this session. You never hear back, right? But
A form letter.
yeah, so get a form letter and kind of expressing a feeling that sometimes organized power, and sometimes it's organized money, as we know, right? There's a lot of interests that have a lot of money or a lot of organized political power that get heard sometimes more than us individually. And so as an organization, Isaiah, what we really try to do is to develop leaders and align interests of many people together to be able to build the political power that we need to be able to shape an agenda like this that we can finally get done. I mean, some of these issues we've been working on for 5 to 20 years. And some of them are brand new, but a lot of these things that we just passed are long time efforts that have taken a lot of organized strategy and power. And you're right that a lot of us, if we just want to try to operate as lone wolves, we don't get very far. And so how can we make sure that we get together and build the power necessary to actually hold our leaders accountable and to co-govern them?
Breakfast and lunch for every child in school.
Yes. And universal school meals. So every child in Minnesota in public schools gets free breakfast and lunch access. And that is just going to make such a difference in making sure our kids are ready to learn. That is really inspiring to me. It just feels like something that really says, this is who we are as Minnesotans and this is what we value.
Well, in Stewartville, where they dump the food in front of the child, because he had to pay for his lunch.
Haven't heard about it.
That's just right there.
Yeah.
New York City pays for breakfast and lunch, so I went to the school board and said, do it. Well, the legislature would say, yes, start to do it.
Yeah. So we've talked about some things that we have already passed, and there's many things that we still want to get done before the end of the session, the end of May. I think the reason why things, are moving so quickly is for many years, we have had a divided legislature where a lot of things have not moved very far. Often they've passed in the Minnesota House, but they haven't gotten a hearing or been able to make it through the Minnesota Senate. And with currently Unified Democratic Farmer Labor Party control in the House and Senate, a lot of our agenda has become more possible to be able to move some of these things forward. And we're able to really think about, okay, how are we going to work together with partner legislators who agree with us on our agenda and move those who don't want to go as far as we do on some of these issues, to make sure that all of the things that we're passing and excited about are inclusive of as many people as possible, that we're not leaving anyone behind when it comes to things like paid family and medical leave and our healthcare public option. So I feel we're in kind of three main issue areas. We advocate for an agenda for a caring economy, a multiracial democracy, and a just climate future. So some of the legislation that we are supporting and working on this year in the caring economy space is paid family and medical leave, which if you all know Tony and George have been like statewide amazing advocates on this. This would provide partial pay leave for any Minnesota worker who is welcoming a new child, who is caring for an ailing family member, who is caring for themselves during a longer term kind of medical issue. So this is something that only like 24% of Minnesota workers have access to right now, and we want to make sure that all workers are able to access that through a public program. So that's something that we're excited about moving this year. Fully funding childcare. Many of you may know that childcare affordability for families and also wages for childcare educators are just at a crisis point. The wages are extremely low for very qualified educators, and families also struggle to afford college childcare. So this is going to require intervention, and this is something that we're advocating for. Yes.
I graduated with a degree in early childhood
Thank you.
education in
Yes.
1975. The last class we had, our instructor said, just so you know, we never mentioned this, but you will not be able to support yourself on the wages.
Wow. Yeah. Let me just repeat that early childhood educators are, the qualifications are really important, and then the wages that we actually pay are not living wages for people to be able to survive on them. And that's just not something that is conscionable, I feel like, in our society. And then also something we're advocating for is public health insurance option through MinnesotaCare. MinnesotaCare is a very successful program that is currently income limited. We're looking to open that, so expand that so that anyone who wants to buy into MinnesotaCare can have the option to do that. And that opens it to a lot of new populations, including small business owners who want to be able to, or self-employed people who may not be able to get affordable health insurance for themselves, people who are undocumented, people who, like me, I've often had marketplace health insurance in past jobs, and it's not very high cost for very low benefits. So being able to, and farmers as well. So there's so many people who are being left behind and not being able to access the healthcare that they need. And it's costing them their homes often, and medical debt, their businesses, their farms. And so this is something that will be a huge intervention. In multiracial democracy, we talked about restore the vote. We're also looking to pass automatic voter registration and pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. So automatic voter registration would, instead of having an opt-in system where we say, okay, I want to be a voter, I'm going to go and register. Automatic voter registration makes it so that if you interact with the state of Minnesota and you're eligible to be a voter, you will just automatically be put on the rolls. You don't have to say, I want to be a voter, right? And this is something that we believe like everyone in our community should be part of the decision-making, like body politic. We shouldn't have to make this an extra step that people have to, look into and opt into. This is something that everyone should just be a part of automatically. And then that pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds allows like students in high school to be able to pre-register so that as soon as they turn 18, they become eligible to vote. And that just makes it a lot easier to organize among our young people to show them that we really value their civic engagement. So that's going to be an exciting reform as well. And driver's licenses, which we talked about, passed as well. And then under just climate future, we've passed 100% clean energy. Another big priority of ours this year is funding for transit, walking and biking infrastructure. There's a lot that's being done around this in the metro, but also there's funding in greater Minnesota for this infrastructure, which we know we need here in Rochester and in a lot of our smaller communities, inter-community, to make sure that people can be able to safely and effectively like walk to where they need to go. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could all just walk to the grocery store? That's like a crazy idea sometimes for some of us, depending on where we live. And that is such an important climate intervention because transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a sector that we need to be, transitioning more of us away from vehicle miles traveled and into public transportation, walking and biking. So that's going to help us to do that. And then we have also other parts of our base, like our Black congregational and Black barbershop and congregational cooperative and our Muslim coalition have some of their own key priorities around affordable housing, around comprehensive public safety and fully funding schools, especially English language training. So we want to open a discussion with you all about like what in that is exciting to you. What's missing? Like, what else are you hoping to see done this legislative session or moving forward? What matters to you?
We're pushing to restore our funding, pushing for a bill that would fund restorative justice. It's not, I say a coalition item, but it is one for us because we have that here and it works. And to have that spread out for at least the opportunity for every county in Minnesota is a really great thing. So we're pushing that.
I found another, yeah.
How close are we to these other areas is as far as getting to a vote level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how much progress are we making on the rest of this agenda? That's a great question. So what I'll say is want to differentiate between the things that have already gotten done and the things that are still in negotiation right now. So the things that have already gotten done were standalone bills. So 100% clean energy, restore the vote, driver's licenses. Universal school meals is a little bit different, so I'll set that aside. But those three big things that we already passed, were able to move more quickly because they didn't really need a whole lot of money. The rest of the things that we're talking about, this is a budget year this year, so they alternate between a budget year and a bonding year. And the rest of session, they have to negotiate of how much money do we dedicate per issue in our state government. And honestly, there's not enough for it still. So everything is moving forward through committees. Some of these pieces are getting merged together by topic. So each committee has what they call an omnibus bill. So the Health and Human Services omnibus bill will include the MinnesotaCare buy-in and a study of what it would take to move us to a single payer healthcare system that fully reflects our values and includes everyone with affordable care. That'll take years in the making, right? And then there's also lots of other pieces towards health and human services. So what is different this year and revolutionary is that the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader all came to an agreement in mid-March to say, within our big budget, here's the targets for each committee topic. So health and human services gets this much, education gets this much, childcare gets this much, taxes gets this much, energy gets this much, right? They did that in mid-March, and usually it's like the beginning of May, and then they have 2 seconds to hustle and get the rest of it across the finish line and negotiate with really long numbers. So they have 6 weeks now to negotiate the rest of the budget. And some of these things are seeing big opposition, like paid family and medical leave in particular has been through lots and lots of committees, and each committee is a potential place where there could be proposals to weaken it or to say these kinds of workers shouldn't get this benefit. This will be too hard on big businesses trying to maximize their profit. The biggest opposition that we're seeing to paid family medical leave for every worker to care for themselves and their loved ones are the largest corporations in Minnesota trying to maximize their profits. The Chamber of Commerce, exactly. And so some of you may have seen some of the narratives that are pushing fear, especially for smaller businesses that are a part of our communities and have, smaller margins right? They're just like trying to get by. It's harder for them to offer benefits to their employees. This would actually level the playing field because there's more support for small businesses too. But the chamber is claiming to represent businesses of all sizes, but their board includes
Excel Energy.
Excel Energy. Fail.
Medtronic.
General
The
Mills,
biggest-
right. Yep. So,
Not every chamber member
right,
agrees with it.
exactly. You've got it right. Exactly, and I know, Tony, you've already been like talking some of your business relationships and what this could mean for our community, what it could benefit them and to be more public and to be more vocal, right? So let me look at our list and see if anything else is really stuck. I think that, to me, that overarching sentiment of it's really in budget negotiations right now. And it's gonna take the next few weeks to get those omnibus bills moving forward. The democracy pieces that Olivia was mentioning are an encompassing package called the Democracy for the People Act. And we actually want that to move separately from the Elections Committee omnibus bill that has other good things like vacancy for college students to register to vote and to participate fully. Yeah, so you're tracking that one. But so the Democracy for the People Act is what includes automatic voter registration, pre-registration for 16, 17-year-olds, more like language justice and support for those needing additional assistance to fully participate, right? So that has actually just passed full house on Thursday. Yay, yes, yes, we were there. And then it hasn't gotten a scheduled date for a full Senate floor vote yet. So that's the next encouragement. And that's actually Senator Bolden has been one of our member leaders. We've been now working with her as she got elected to the House of Representatives and now in the Senate. And she is our champion on a Democracy for the People package. She is the one that is hustling on the inside to land a floor vote for the Senate on the Democracy for the People Act. And she needs you all to keep saying that you want this. Even if she is your senator or you have Senator Nelson, that's where sometimes going back to your point of like, if you're an individual, just contacting your legislator, if you feel like pleading with a brick wall alone, right? They actually have to track every single contact that they get and on what topic and what you all care about. And that is the measure of accountability. But it's actually more effective accountability when we do it together. Does that help answer your question? Okay. Other questions or reactions or what do you want us to prioritize? What are we missing?
I just wanted to reframe part of the transportation connectivity, because sometimes it's talked about this as limiting cars, but I think it's reconnecting people because it increases the number of times you're interacting with your neighbors, people you live around in these settings where you're walking or on transit or just you live closer to the places you're going. So I think that's really exciting for me because I feel like as I've grown up, I've seen a breakdown in simple connections, and I think that that's something that's exciting about rebuilding the vibrancy of our communities where we live.
I love that. Thank you for that value. Reconnectivity, reconnecting our communities. That goes back to what Olivia was talking about was like healthy, interconnected communities. We can address our climate, our housing, our transit and transportation, our good jobs goals at the same time. Yeah. Yeah.
The budget surplus from last year, has it been allocated or is it still
Good question.
negotiable?
Right, so how is the budget surplus shaking out? Great question. So what we know now with the most updated budget forecasts are that there's $17.5 billion surplus, which sounds wild. And it's mostly one-time dollars, a combination of federal programs and then some extra dollars, because also like the wealthiest of corporations did really well during the pandemic while most of us have been struggling to take care of our loved ones. And only about 5.5 billion, right, is actually ongoing surplus. And we've been underfunding our community needs for decades, like underfunding education. The equation for childcare hasn't worked for families to have affordable childcare and for childcare providers, those caring adults, to make a living wage either, right? So we have this backlog of deep community needs and primarily one-time surplus. So as we've been seeing those budget negotiations shake out, what we've seen from our ally Education Minnesota, organizing educators, they were calling for $4.4 billion ongoing to fully fund our schools, to have smaller class sizes, to have more support. And that's not possible with the ongoing surplus and the ongoing budget to meet that $4.4 billion. We were calling for $2.5 billion with our Kids Count on Us coalition for ongoing childcare funding to actually address that system fully. And that wasn't possible with all of the needs in Minnesota. So I think it's like 1.3 now, right? That has gotten negotiated, which again is historic and still not enough, right? So a lot of those one-time dollars though will also go to housing. So that is a good thing. That is like, we can build permanent infrastructure with one-time dollars, and same with updating like our energy grids to transition to 100% clean energy. We can use and leverage those federal dollars really creatively and in a one-time way. But that question of how are we making sure that those who are already doing really well in our society are paying their fair share so that we have ongoing sustained resources to meet our community needs. So everything else is getting negotiated right now and wanting to make sure that, yes, there will be some tax cuts, but who is that relief going to? Is those we would hope and are advocating for that relief is to go to those who need it the most. Our seniors, our lower income families, our lower income families with children in particular, right? Renters, yeah, there's a renter's tax credit that's being proposed as well. So there's lots of different angles to really address people's needs. Does that help? Great. Yeah.
Can I just mention, the one-time dollars, for paid family and medical leave, there would be money that would go into a fund to start that sooner than if that would have passed prior to having a surplus. Because it would have taken a couple of years of that program being in place to build up the funds to be able to offer it to workers. So this is going to allow it to start a lot sooner. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that, Tiffany. That's great. Any other questions, reactions to these priorities so far that we're advocating to get across the finish line this year? Yeah.
There is anything on guns?
Anything on guns? Good question. So, so we know that's near and dear to the heart of many of our people in shared values to make sure we can all live safely in our communities and especially our kids in our schools. And as we've talked about shaping Isaiah's priorities as an organization, it's taken years to build this agenda like Olivia was talking about, and hearing from you all what we need to directly prioritize, and things we listed will not happen without us. And then we do plenty of work in coalition or supporting other partners. So on reducing gun violence, Moms Demand Action and Protect Minnesota are leading out in front on that. And in fact, Senator Bolden organized with us and with Moms Demand Action initially. So again, she's an organizer at heart. This is near and dear to her heart too. I think the main angles towards reducing gun violence would be red flag laws and universal background checks. And I know those are still part of the conversation, but I don't entirely know where they're at in the process. It's a great question. Yeah.
I also have a question about local. I think I just received an email from Isaiah about environmental commission being disbanded in Rochester.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's actually a great transition. So I was going to talk about a little bit about kind of what we're up to. And we work at the state level doing a lot of legislative stuff right now, but we also take action at the local level and respond to things that align with our agenda that are important. And so there's a couple of things coming up on Monday night and Tuesday night in Rochester. On Monday night, the city council is meeting to consider a trail connection over on the southwest side of Soldiers Field to connect, basically make a safer biking, walking, multi-use trail connection for families to be able to get to the park, the pool, for people to get around the city. So that's something that we are showing up for together. And on Tuesday night, the county board for Olmsted County is meeting, and they are considering discontinuing the environmental commission, which to me, and when you hear that, you're like, we have bigger environmental challenges than ever. and a lot of funds coming from the federal and state government specifically to address climate issues. So is this really the best way forward? And there's some proposals to kind of transform the way that that's done through like specific task groups, working groups. In my opinion, and some of the other leaders that I've been meeting with around this, it's a very vague and delayed proposal where they're going to end the commission and maybe they'll set up one working group that hasn't been defined yet sometime in the late summer. And it just doesn't really seem like a very serious approach to the environmental challenges that we face that are so great. So we're going to be showing up on Tuesday to talk a little bit about that and to find out more and to try and see, okay, how can we really make sure that we're seriously addressing these issues?
And it's a bipartisan issue. Dave Senjo, who was a state senator and now is on the county commission, is fully in support of continuing the environmental commission as is.
Yeah.
And expanding its scope or keeping it continuous.
Yeah. So thank you, Nick. Nick mentioned, this is a bipartisan issue. Dave Senjo is actually one of the kind of people who's leading on, hey, let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we can form working groups within the environmental commission, and we can, reinvigorate its membership, which is it's been a little bit kind of waning recently, and like, it's not like there's a shortage of people in our community who care about the environment. So let's see if we can really reinvigorate it rather than just end it and then maybe sometime later set up something new.
Hey, Carrie, were there any questions coming in from the chat? I just didn't want to miss anyone.
Not yet, but I will do also that.
Yeah. So I'm just I want to know too, I'm going to try to close this out in the next few minutes because I know some folks may want to go up for the 11 o'clock service, but we'll still be around to answer questions and chat with you too and continue the conversation. So wanted to talk about what we do and how we get involved. So we've been talking this whole time about making these public decisions together and stepping into thinking about these are the things we care about. What are we going to do about it? And some of the things that we do as Isaiah, Kathryn actually was my talking about the pens. These are some examples of things that we're doing that you might want to step into action with us on. Every Tuesday night on Zoom from 6 to 7 p.m. during the legislative session. So for the next, 4 or 5 weeks or so, we meet with partner legislators across southern Minnesota who are working together with us on our agenda. And they share with us strategic updates on what's going on at the Capitol, what's been moving that week, what are the obstacles that we need to overcome, where's the most helpful thing to, write to our legislators about, show up at. And so that's an exciting opportunity. If you're curious about, okay, what's going on up at the Capitol and like, what's the best way to meet for me to join my voice with other people? Joining us for any of those Tuesday nights, 6 to 7 that you can, is a great chance to stay up to date. We do a lot of events up at the Capitol and we can organize carpools for those that either go to the Capitol or the Democracy for the People Act floor vote this week. There's been a lot of public hearings, rallies, moments where having a lot of people together up at the Capitol in support of some of these issues is really powerful. And in fact, it's really fun. It's like, oh my gosh, to be able to see democracy in action, learn how committee hearings kind of work, observe order votes. If you've never done that before, it's really educational and interesting. Having forums in our community all throughout the spring. We had 2 here at Christ United, one on education funding and one on paid family and medical leave. Anybody here come to either of those forums? They were wonderful. And, sharing people's stories of how this personally impacts them. And also, calling people together to say, what do we need to do to get these things across the finish line? One big thing that's coming up is right up there on the 29th of April in the afternoon. We're having a rally to celebrate and, push our legislators in the last 3 weeks of session to say, these are some of the issues that we really want to make sure they get done, like paid family and medical leave, like the health insurance public option, climate action through transit funding, housing, access to first-time homeownership, a lot of these issues that we want to make sure they get across the finish line. So we're trying to get 200 people together at Martin Luther King Park on that day, and it's going to be exciting and fun. And we hope that we have a really good contingent from Christ United to join us and say, this is what we stand for as a congregation. That's really our closing argument to legislators. And so as the session wraps up, we're going to have a celebration, like a picnic at the end of the session. And then we're going to kind of launch into our summer and fall season of listening and agenda setting and thinking about what's next. And I wanted at this point invite Tony and George up to talk bit about, they've been involved with Isaiah in a deep way to talk about what that's meant for them, what that's been like, and what they would like others to know about taking action with Isaiah.
I know most of you here. Isaiah really has been a vehicle of getting things passed I've done a lot of volunteer work with a lot of different organizations, and I have to say Isaiah is the most organized. They just have that clear path of this is what we need to do to get things over the finish line. And I've been so impressed with Isaiah. I've been working with their lobbyists probably for 8 years or so on paid family medical leave. And it just means a lot to me that it's gonna pass. Pay leave is going to pass. Yeah. So the partnerships that Isaiah has with the coalitions that they are part of, they may not take the lead on an issue, but they are very much there, just keeping it in its line, making its way. And I really appreciate just the enthusiasm. There's just an opportunity really for us as a church where maybe we should look at how creating some type of group here within our church that could address some of our local issues. Because when I've gone to some of the day and a half or longer trainings that Isaiah has been part of, you'll see that there are groups in Minneapolis that might be addressing rent control or different issues. St. Paul, they have been very successful this year. And so they give you a way and they support you throughout when you're just trying to address what is meaningful to you and your family. So I just want to thank Olivia and Kathryn because they are wonderful to work with. And I think that it's their enthusiasm that just keeps everybody on board to get some very positive things done.
This thought occurs to me a lot, like do all the good you can by any means you can. That should sound familiar to everybody. I mean, this Methodist church exists because someone saw that and had that vision. I mean, there were a lot of other problems that he was looking at, but Christian apathy was one of those issues. And that's why we're Methodists. I hope. I know some of you well enough that you figured this out already. And you're our role model. I hope that you continue to do that because we do see it. We do see that, you know. Just this is kind of an odd story, but we were just looking at legislation and a driver's license for all. I can't remember the senator who sponsored it, Bobby Joe Champion. So I was looking at Bobby Joe Champion's other legislative initiatives, all the bills, and he has 4 pages bills. And I'm scrolling down and I think, well, there's something about restorative justice. That's how this whole thing happened, because I saw that. I thought, well, wait a minute, I know somebody, Kendall Hughes, he's involved in that. And that started this whole thing about we need to get Kendall Hughes into a session to testify. Now, we only had 2 minutes, but if you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. Very powerful testimony. In fact, some of the most I've ever heard in a Senate session. And that's because Kendall Hughes went up there and we knew when to get him to be in that session. And he was the only one to testify for restorative justice.
Yeah, the only public.
Only public, yes. So that's why, you know, it's sort of like maybe it's not Isaiah, but they sort of put you in front of that. And I think maybe we would be better citizens if we participated more in what happens in our democracy, not just every other year or every 4 years. And please participate because it really makes a huge difference. But it gets you to understand it's your government, not the person you elected government. And you mentioned, you know, you're ignoring, well, let's go to their office. Let's just walk in. I mean, we have to make sure they're there and that they know we're coming, but we could do that. We could write down a list of things we are concerned about. It's your right, and you should do it. And even if it's somebody who doesn't agree with what your initiatives are, what you believe in, that doesn't matter.
Because you have a voice, you really have to exercise that voice. So I encourage everyone to get, do all you can by all the, do all the good you can, by all the means you can. Thank you very much.
I had a great conversation recently with Nick. And we are talking about how we can pull a group together within our church. So probably more to come, right? Good. Yeah, yeah.
So I just wanted to reemphasize, thank you both for stepping in with your faith, with your action, and inviting others. Because it takes all of us to do what you can do. With that commitment form is your discernment of what you can do right now, today, who you need to go have this kind of conversation with beyond today. And I know we talked a lot about like what's possible with a DFL trifecta that feels like it's speeding ahead, built on years and decades of work. But again, it's not a guarantee because one party has control that they're gonna be able to get all the things done, much less all the things that we've said that our communities need. The last time there was complete trifecta with the DFL, they caved and didn't go as boldly on racial and economic justice. Were worried about losing their seats if they did so, and backed off of some promises they had made to their communities and the people that sent them there in the first place, like driver's licenses for immigrants, driver's licenses for all, and restore the vote. So it takes all of us to keep showing to our elected officials, here's what our communities need. Let's get it done together. And to have enough people power for that accountability where they feel like I have to deliver on this if I want to keep doing all the good that I can do on the inside, right? They need to hear from you all the time and 200 of your friends on the 29th, right? Yes.
So fabulous. Thank you all for being with us today. Yeah, please, your commitment forms or next step sheets of how you want to be involved and how we can continue to work together and keep the conversation going. Give those to me or Kathryn, I'll bring them up here. And I want to thank you all for being with us today, and we'll still be around to answer questions and talk with you about what's most important to you and what amazing life-changing, life-giving progress we can get done by the end of May. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.